$9 billion. That is how much Elizabeth Holmes convinced the world her company was worth, built on a machine that did not work, a voice she did not own, and a lie she told with unblinking eyes for over a decade. This is the autopsy of Theranos. In 2003, a 19-year-old Stanford dropout walked into the offices of venture capitalists in Silicon Valley with a pitch so simple it felt like destiny. She wanted to revolutionize healthcare, not incrementally, not gradually. She wanted to make it possible to run hundreds of medical tests from a single drop of blood, taken from a fingertip, analyzed in minutes, at a fraction of the cost of conventional labs. The machine she claimed could do this was called the Edison. It was going to save lives. It was going to democratize medicine. It was, according to prosecutors and a jury of her peers, a fraud. To understand how a 19-year-old becomes a $9 billion lie, you have to understand the environment that made her possible. Silicon Valley in the early 2000s operated on a particular kind of faith. The faith that a visionary founder, given enough conviction and enough capital, could bend reality to their will. Holmes understood this religion intuitively. She wore a black turtleneck. She dropped her voice an entire octave, a detail that would later surface in testimony as a deliberate affectation. She invoked Steve Jobs, not by name but by aesthetic, by posture, by the sheer force of her certainty. And investors, titans of industry, decorated generals, former secretaries of state, they believed her. The board of Theranos read like a geopolitical masterclass. George Shultz, Henry Kissinger, James Mattis. Not scientists, not doctors, not anyone who might ask the wrong technical questions. This was by design. Holmes allegedly kept the science siloed, the employees compartmentalized, the real engineers separated from the salespeople, and the salespeople separated from the truth. At the center of it all was the Edison device. The promise was extraordinary. One drop of blood, a panel of 240 tests, results in hours. Real commercial labs required multiple vials of blood, specialized equipment, and days. If Theranos worked, it would have been a genuine revolution. But according to the evidence presented at trial, the Edison could only reliably run a handful of tests on its own. For the rest, Theranos was allegedly diluting patient blood samples and running them through conventional third-party machines made by Siemens, the same machines used by every other lab, while telling patients and doctors the results came from their proprietary technology. The implications of this were not abstract. These were real patients making real medical decisions based on the results. Allegedly inaccurate results. There were patients who were told they might have HIV, patients who received false positives for cancer markers, patients who made treatment decisions or delayed them based on numbers that should never have left that machine. When the whistleblowers began to surface, Holmes and her partner Ramesh Balwani, known as Sunny, allegedly responded with legal pressure, with intimidation, with a wall of lawyers and non-disclosure agreements. One early employee who raised concerns was the grandson of board member George Shultz. Tyler Shultz went to his grandfather first. George Shultz sided with Holmes. Tyler eventually went to regulators anyway. In October 2015, a Wall Street Journal reporter named John Carreyrou published the first of what would become a series of devastating investigations. The story landed like a stone through a glass building. Holmes went on television. She called the allegations false. She said the company was being attacked by entrenched interests who feared disruption. She was composed. She was defiant. She was losing. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services launched an inspection of Theranos' Newark, California laboratory. What they found triggered a cascade. In 2016, CMS revoked Theranos' laboratory certification, banned Holmes from operating labs for 2 years, and threatened to cut off the company from Medicare and Medicaid reimbursements. Walgreens, which had partnered with Theranos to place blood testing kiosks in hundreds of stores, terminated the relationship and sued. Safeway, which had spent nearly $400 million building out clinics in anticipation of a Theranos partnership, walked away with nothing. The $9 billion valuation collapsed to zero. In June 2018, federal prosecutors indicted both Elizabeth Holmes and Sunny Balwani on wire fraud and conspiracy charges. Holmes faced 11 counts. Balwani faced 12. The indictment alleged they had defrauded investors out of more than $900 million and had defrauded patients and doctors by claiming their technology could accurately detect conditions including cancer, heart disease, and diabetes. Claims the government said were not supported by the evidence. Holmes's trial began in August 2021. It lasted nearly 4 months. She took the stand in her own defense, a rare and high-stakes decision. She testified that she genuinely believed in the technology. She testified that the product roadmap had been on track. And in what became the most discussed moment of the trial, she alleged that Balwani had psychologically and sexually abused her throughout their relationship, an allegation Balwani denied. The jury deliberated for 7 days. On January 3, 2022, they returned a verdict: guilty on 4 counts of fraud and conspiracy related to investors, not guilty on the counts involving patients. The split verdict was legally significant. Financially, the outcome was total. On November 18, 2022, a federal judge sentenced Elizabeth Holmes to 11 years and 3 months in federal prison. Sunny Balwani was convicted separately on all 12 counts and sentenced to nearly 13 years. She reported to prison in May 2023 after exhausting her appeals. The investors lost. The patients lost data, trust, and in some cases, peace of mind about their own health. The employees who believed in the mission, and many of them, genuinely did lost years of their careers, and in some cases, their professional reputations. The money did not disappear into thin air. It dissolved the way it always does in these cases, into legal fees, into operational costs for a machine that never worked, into salaries for a company performing a service it could not actually perform. What the autopsy of Theranos reveals is not a story about one uniquely evil person. It is a story about what happens when an industry confuses storytelling with truth. Venture capital rewards narrative. It rewards confidence. It rewards the founder who walks in with certainty and a vision so clean, so big, so humanly appealing, democratizing healthcare, saving lives, that due diligence feels almost rude. The mechanism of every great financial collapse is the same. Someone builds a bridge between what is and what could be, and charges tolls before the bridge exists. Sometimes the bridge gets built. Sometimes you look down and realize you are standing on nothing. $9 billion. 1 drop of blood. 0 working tests. The fortune did not die because the idea was bad. The fortune died because the idea was sold as a fact before it was ever a reality. That is always how the money dies.